Hi, I'm Jennifer. We have over, I think, 400 people who've RSVP'd for this, and which is, I'm told, perhaps a record for this webinar series. And I'm super excited, as you are, to talk to Bill and Dave. I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds, and then I'm going to start because I know that we're all really excited to hear what they have to say. And I also see a lot of friends on chat. Thanks. It's so great to see classmates and colleagues here. So thanks for joining us. All right. As people are joining, let me just quickly start. I'm going to say thank you to Kayla and Savannah for all their hard work setting up this special event. And also Bill and Dave, thank you so much for joining me here.
Glad to be here.
Great to have you guys. Hello and welcome to the Yale SOM webinar, How Design Thinking Can Help You Navigate 2020 with Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. Before I forget to mention it, around 12:30, we're going to move to exclusively Q&A. So please make sure you submit your questions through the Q&A box in the Zoom, which is down on the bottom. I am Jennifer Zoga, SOM class of 99, an entrepreneur, assistant professor, and management consultant, and also a huge fan of our two panelists here today. Bill Burnett and Dave Evans are the authors of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Designing Your Life, How to Build a Well-Lived and Joyful Life, and the recently released Designing Your Work Life, How to Thrive and Change and Find Happiness at Work, which was just named one of Amazon's top 20 business and leadership books for 2020. Bill Burnett is the executive director of the design program at Stanford and an adjunct professor of mechanical engineering. Dave Evans is a lecturer for the product design program at Stanford, a management consultant and co-founder of Electronic Arts. They combined their empathetic design thinking superpowers to create what Fast Company called Stanford University's most popular class, and I like to call a social movement. I'm sure that you're as excited as I am to jump right into a conversation with Bill and Dave here so that we can learn more how to embrace change and feel emboldened to tackle the wicked problems and unknown waters of 2020, finding purpose and even joy while we're at it. So let's dive right in it, okay? Bill, Dave, how can design thinking help us navigate 2020?
Well, thank you, Jennifer. That's a really big question to start with, but let me start by at least explaining so that everybody knows what design thinking is and what it isn't. David Kelly, our senior academic guy, the guy I work for at Stanford, who started the D School and started IDEO, the big consultancy, the creativity consultancy, it says we're kind of with design thinking, we're in this period of high expectation and low understanding. Like everybody thinks it's cool, but not everybody's really sure what it is. So let me tell you what it is. It's just another way of solving problems. We got a bunch of different ways of solving problems that we teach at Stanford. I'm sure you teach at Yale as well. So if you're an engineer, you learn engineering thinking. And if you want to build a bridge, you just need to know how long the bridge is, how strong the steel is, how many cars are going to be on the bridge. It's a very, we call it tame problem, in that we have the equations to solve that problem. And if you've given me accurate data, my solution will work. And it'll work. That same bridge will work in New Orleans and Boston and Hartford and San Francisco. Now, we're speaking mostly to the alumni of the School of Management. So you've learned in a business school, you learn to do what we call business thinking. It's not exactly the same as engineering because it's the data is not as precise as the strength of steel, but you can look at investment decisions versus return on investment, return on assets. You can look at projections of forward earnings and see how two different investments might look, and you make a decision. We decide our way forward in the business school world. We make optimum decisions. Engineering, we just analyze our way forward. So design thinking is working on this other kind of problem where there's people involved. And it gets really messy because even if I do a lot of, empathy work and I really try to understand what you need, Jennifer, once I show you my prototype of the thing I built, exactly the thing you said you wanted, 9 out of 10 times what's going to happen is Jennifer's going to look at my prototype. She's going to go, oh, is that what you can do? Well, if that's what you can do, I don't want that. You know what I really want? And people change their mind and they change their needs. And actually, when they're given new solutions, their needs reconfigure, and now they have other things they want to do. So in those kinds of problems, design thinking is really useful because it's an iterative, prototyping, building to think, building your way forward kind of method. And it's the best way we know of coming up with new to the world things in the future. And we've been teaching it at Stanford since 1963. We called it different things, human-centered design or ergonomic design in the early days. Now we call it design thinking. And when Dave and I got together in 2006, 2007, to talk about maybe creating a class for Stanford students, it was pretty clear to me that in lots and lots of hours of office hours, the Stanford students in general were confused about how to launch into the world. You know, the universities are really good at filling kids up with knowledge, but not very good at explaining what that knowledge is for or what it will lead to in the world. And so, you know, this idea of designing your future seemed like a perfect design thinking kind of problem. And you know, it's been, that's 13, 14 years ago that we started applying this to the wicked problem of your life at and after the university. And now we've talked to mid-career people in their 20s and 30s and 40s. Dave is doing work with a really cool group of people at Stanford called the Distinguished Career Institute, people typically in their 50s and 60s who've had a distinguished career and now are coming back to do freshman year at Stanford again.
The gap year for grown-up program.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, Jennifer, let me tell you a brief story about design thinking and MBAs. So gosh, must be 5-6 years ago now. The Career Management Center over at the GSB at Stanford, on the other side of the campus, calls them and says, "Hey, can you guys help us?" We kind of go, "Sure, we're helpful." And that turns into what becomes the career design program, applying these principles, but in this other context, you know. And when we talk to incoming MBAs, so there's a seminar, there's an opt-in, it's all elective stuff. And here come, you know, it's a small school, only 400, you know, students per class. So I'm in front of these 400 people go, "Well, what are you here for?" And if you're, you're a Yale SOM, you're a Stanford GSB student, you know, you're a highly focused, highly selective person. I mean, you know what you want. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's not the look you find on these students' faces. And typically, why are we here? Well, we're here either to get way better at what I'm doing and just turbocharge it. You know, I'm here to jump shift into another category. You know, I'm going to go start something, you know, from scratch. You know, I've got something in mind. And we put a slide up and talk about that. And everybody goes, yeah. And I kind of go, I think there's a fourth category too. You know, and it's a long acronym, TTFIDLWK. So it looks like tiddlywinks. And it stands for that thing I didn't know I was looking for. Well, also, while we're here for these 2 years, for the resident students, you've got 2 years to really explore your future. How many are kind of hoping that while you're here, you bang into that thing I didn't know I was looking for, but now that I have found it, I think is absolutely fabulous. And like 90% go, yeah, I'm really looking for that. I kind of go, great. How are you planning that? How do you plan to bump into that thing you didn't know you're looking for? And I'll hear this other little MBA dark secret, because I've got 2 years. This is gonna be great. It's gonna be a great time of exploration. Yeah, that's great. Let's spend that great big fat chunk of time. And of course, go, because when you leave, when you're all done, you absolutely want the killer job, of course. And of course, you get the killer job you've got of the killer internship in the summer between the first and second year. And of course, to do that, the really killer internship, I came to this school because of its reputation, and it's really the critical companies where the network is strongest that I want to do that with. So I should really be doing the internship work with the on-campus recruiting, and that starts in the 6th week of the first year. So really, you're already late. You're done. And they kind of go, oh God, yeah, I just realized that. And so here's these forces that even as an MBA, you're supposed to have it all figured out. We go, look, dude, don't get stymied on those dysfunctional beliefs about the way it has to be. Let's design your life, or at least design your education while you're here. So, we have some sympathy for how MBAs can bang into this stuff, because the world and often ourselves expect us to have all the answers.
Let me ask you to give a couple definitions while we're talking here, if you don't mind. You mentioned dysfunctional beliefs. And you've also talked about, I said wicked problems, but gravity problems and anchor problems. I think that those are all particularly interesting with what we're dealing with now.
Yeah, and that'll bring us right back to 2020.
Yeah. And they're all about the ways people get stuck, right? They don't know what to do, and they're stuck, and they get frustrated, and then being stuck by itself can just become a problem.
So what, DB, Bill, what's a DB, Bill?
Dysfunctional belief. There's actually a whole list of them that the psychologists have put together, and they're there are things that you believe that either aren't true, or they may be true, but they're not useful. And so they create no action in the world. Some of them that are our favorites are, hey, just follow your passion. Follow your passion, everything's gonna be great. Well, it turns out 8 out of 10 people don't have a passion. If you look at the research from the Stanford Center for the Study of Adolescence, a guy named Bill Damon, who's an amazing researcher, 8 out of 10 people don't have a passion. So what the heck am I supposed to do? I'm one of those 8. You still told me to follow my passion, as if somehow the world is just going to let me do whatever I decide I'm passionate about. It's not useful. First, if you were 2 and you always wanted to be a brain surgeon and now you're a brain surgeon, awesome. But you're in a very small minority. So dysfunctional beliefs are things that hold you back, because by believing in them, you cannot succeed in a life design going forward. And that's different than anchors and gravities. You want to talk anchors? Dave's to say,
I think a big dysfunctional belief that's been arriving on our shores lately is, oh gosh, during the pandemic, I can't make any progress. My career is completely stymied now. No, it's not. It's changed, but nonetheless. So anchor and gravity problems. These are 2 classes of problems on which people get stuck, and they get thoroughly stuck. Now, a gravity problem, is, we say, if it's not actionable, it's not a problem, it's a circumstance. So the sort of silly metaphor is, I'm a bicyclist, and I did not gain the freshman 15 when I was 18 in college, but I sure gained the old guy 20 when I became 65. I'm now 67 with 8.7 grandchildren. And so I go to Bill and I go, Bill, dude, so I kind of picked up some weight, and it's kind of wrecked my cycling, this gravity thing. It's killing me. I'm in the wrong gear all the time. Can you fix gravity? Can you help me figure out, let's have a brainstorm to solve the gravity problem. Oh, gravity's not working for me. And Bill looks at me kind of goes, no, Dave, I can't help you. Gravity is not something I can know anything about. So there are a lot of people who have a problem, and the problem is completely insoluble. Now, there's a dicey area here, which like literally you can't fix gravity. It's a pure circumstance. Or the thing is so freaking hard that it may not be worth your effort. Now,
or it's not your challenge.
Saying don't try.
Yeah, it's not your challenge, maybe.
Yeah, it's just you have to make a qualified decision about what risk you're willing to take. So that's gravity problems. Then anchor problems are a particularly thorny one, and smart people really fall for this all the time, which is where your problem statement buries the solution inside the question. And the solution you've buried in your question is inaccessible, and in so doing, bolts you to chains you down to the ground like an anchor, and you can't move. And so I really want to expand my career, so I need a vice presidency, and the company's decided to go flat, I'm really stuck.
Which is not making any more vice presidents, and I want to be a vice president. How do I solve this problem?
And the problem there isn't that, it's not that there's no such thing. It's not a gravity problem, because there's not no such thing as promotion or change or variety. There's just no vice presidency. So you get one little tiny answer called VP on a business card stuck in your head in your question, and now you got to do a reframe. So the thing about both gravity and anchor problems is there are reframes. So, well, Dave, what other ways could you make it easier to go up the hill on your bicycle? You could downshift and let your ego down and be in the wrong gear. You could actually lose some weight. You could buy one of those powered bikes. There are lots of ways to go up a hill that don't involve gravity changing. Or, hey, Mr. Vice President, if it's getting wider, can you go lateral? Can you start doing things on the side? Can you have a multiplexed career? Can you start tutoring and coaching other people? What did you want out of being a vice president? Did you want more money? Did you want more influence? Did you want less work? Or did you want better ties? What are you looking for? So that's what gravity and anchor problems are about. And they're proliferating like rabbits right now.
Yeah, so you have your new book, which you launched right before everyone shut down. Yeah. And but you've created, the Designing Your COVID Life series, and you've been talking. So I'd love to hear some of the learnings that you've had along the way, adapting your prototype from the book to everything that's shocked and happened now.
Well, I think one of the, one potential gravity problem here is everybody's kind of like, when's this going to be over and when's it going to be normal again?
When are we going to get back?
When's it going to be back to where it was? And I think the answer is it's not. It's never going to be exactly back to where it was. because the world of work will change, because of, the ability to work at a distance is now demonstrated to be useful. So I read a study that, we did manage to get a lovely week in New York on February 25th when we launched the book, and both Dave and I love New York. I was reading a story in the New York Times a couple months ago saying, hey, if 50% of the workers in downtown Manhattan don't come to work, just work from home, half the buildings in downtown Manhattan are empty. And that may be, what happens after this. So I think you got to look very carefully at how you're framing your approach to this COVID crisis and to what you think is coming next, because it's easy to get anchored on, no, I only want it to be like this. If I can't have this, I can't have anything. Or to just be stuck in the whole, the non-acceptance that things are really, really different. The economy is going to be different. The way we work is going to be different. And, there are some big advantages in that. My very first boss ever taught me never waste a good crisis. There's always something that can come out of this. But I do think it's going to be tough for a while yet.
When we first launched 3 years ago, we're out on the road and we were about to go at the 5 a.m. early, news TV show in Toronto, Canada. And the assistant producer turns to me and says, your 7-minute interview, we're behind. Your 7 minutes is now down to 4. By the way, we need the book in a sentence. Are you ready? I go, dude, we are Stanford instructors. We are not renowned for our one-sentence answers to complex questions. I, in particular, am not renowned for one-sentence answers. And he goes, well, then you're off the air. And I go, give me a minute. I'm an old marketing guy. I can do this. So what came out of that is actually 4 sentences, but only 10 words. And so the sort of keep it simple version, if you haven't got time for the 269 pages, those of you who are participating haven't read it yet, skip it. Just go to these 10 words. Get curious, talk to people, try stuff, tell your story. Get curious, talk to people, try stuff, tell your story. And by the way, 2 of those in the middle are both prototyping, because that tells you how important prototypes are. Now, when COVID came along, people said, well, help us design our COVID logs. We said, well, it's kind of the same thing. It's just harder. And they're going to go, no, we need more than that. So when you look at that short list of 4 things, we doubled down with 2 more in particular that were always true, but we brought to higher position. And one is generative acceptance and one is managed mindset. And maybe let's zoom in on the generative acceptance. It turns out acceptance is what Bill and I call step 0 of the design process. These design mindsets and the design process. And step 1 in design is empathy. I'm sure that we'll come back to that. But the step 0 is acceptance. You have to start designing exactly. You can only design in reality. You can't design in the land of should in your head or the not what I had in mind. Those places where people spend a lot of time, you can't do design because there's nobody there. Design is an empirical methodology. It requires reality to work. It turns out acceptance is step 5 in the Kubler-Ross grief process and step 0 in design. And the world is in grief of the world we knew that isn't here anymore, and all the people we can't touch, and all that. And then the pandemic of grief is real. But it's kind of interesting that where grief leaves off, design wants to begin. And there's a couple of ways you can do acceptance, and only one of them really works. But I want you to cover the 3 acceptances.
Well, you can just sort of stuff it. Like I'm gonna wait this one out. I'm fine. I'm okay. It's gonna be fine. So that's
a suppressed acceptance.
Suppressing your acceptance. I'm here, but it's really struggling.
I got it.
There's
oppressive.
Oppressive. Oh my God, this is so bad. I guess I can handle it, but boy, I just want to complain all the time because I've been stuck in this downstairs, office since March 18th. And both of those are really not healthy because, if you're not acknowledging your feelings, if you're trying to stuff them, that's not good. And if you're just wallowing in the grief that everybody is wallowing in, and every time and you're reading the news over and over and over again, and you're reading all the bad things that are happening, not just here, but all over the world, that's not a healthy place to work from. And so, our idea is that the kind of acceptance that's generative, the kind of acceptance that says, okay, here's where we're at. I got it. Now, what are the things that I can do from here? What are the small prototypes I can run? What are the the people I can reach out to, who can I radically collaborate with, who can I have empathy for, what can I do? And then the other big message in the second book is, our method is set the bar low. Try something really simple. There's a question that came up in one of the Q&As about how do I get started? It's like, it's scary to try anything new, and it's particularly scary in the COVID crisis when you don't know what the outcomes might be. Just to start small, to start really, really simply. So don't suppress, don't oppress, but be generative in your acceptance. And that gives you a place to start from.
We've done some of these conversations, and particularly students coming around out of college. You just graduated, you're about to, you climbed up to the top of the high dive, you're going to jump off into the big pool of the world, and they drain the pool while you're getting your cap and gown on. I mean, holy cow. It's really terrifying. And what can I do? And if you really unpack a lot of the questions I've been hearing, and you reword them, what they're really saying is, hey, Dave, how can design thinking help me jump the line so that I get to the head of the pack when this thing turns back on again? Or how do I beat this thing? I know some people are not really being, pushed back or sequestered by COVID. They're thriving. I want to be one of those people. How do I win that game? How do I use design to cheat the system? And design is not a technique of magic. There's no Aladdin's lamp. There's no aha. There's no transmogrifier, involved to make things suddenly be different. What it is a way of engaging reality really, really well. And Bill mentioned earlier this waiting room versus neutral zone. So this language. Bill Bridges wrote the classic 80s and has made a whole career. Particularly works with large organizations now in doing change management, and he distinguishes change from transition. Change is what's going on in the outside world. Transition is what's happening to you. And the transition as a human being of a major change is a 3-step, not a 2-step process. There's the ending, but then before the new beginning, there's this kind of gray, mushy place in the middle called the neutral zone. You don't go from found version A to found version B. You go from found to lost to found. And we don't like getting lost. And a lot of people who try real hard to just jump right into being found again, end up frankly just going back and doing the old thing over again, because they just are refusing to live through the ambiguity. And there's in the new book a chapter that talks about good enough for, I know it's not good enough. And if you're asking the question too hard about how is exactly everything I'm doing today contributing to the revised career that will be fabulously successful in the new world we haven't even seen yet post-pandemic, how is that true today? Which is what you want to have be true. It's a legitimate want. You just can't have it. So if you do this huge acceptance that, look, I'm going to do what I can, making the most of the time, not just biding my time, I'm truly making the most of the time. And you got to have some faith and trust that, as the new world arrives, you're going to be able to adapt in it. And that really is good enough for now, because we really are in the neutral zone. We're not in the waiting room for the world to come back. We're in the neutral zone on our way to a place we have literally never been before.
I think that's so interesting when you're talking about, that the stage of the world in grief right now, because I've seen the several articles that, there were in HBR and,
right.
And, the New York Times. And the idea that we can move past that and feel some sense of control, I think is really helpful, because that sense of despair and that things are out of your control, design thinking really flips that on its head.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've enjoyed in reading what people have said about the book, readers have said about the book, either on Amazon or some places, one of the very first reviews was, clearly, the authors respect the autonomy of the reader. We don't should on you. We don't should on our students. We don't should on you in the book. It's first do no harm, and certainly don't tell people what to do, because we don't know what would work best in your life. But we know some ideas and some tools that might be useful to sort of sort it out for yourself. So we're trying to enable you to be the designer, right? You're the designer of your life. Would you like a way of breaking down how to think about impact? We got something for that. Would you like a way of thinking about what do you actually make in the, what do you make? How much do you make? Well, I make a lot of different things. I make money, I make impact, I make expression, I make lots of different things. So we just give people better frameworks, I think, to answer the questions for themselves. But, when Dave was mentioning, we are in this thing where managing your mindset, managing accept, and managing the fact that we are in the neutral zone. between what was before and what will come, next, and it'll be lumpy, I'm doing a lot to help my students find jobs, because I remember sitting with a bunch of students in December saying, guys, you're graduating with the best job market I've ever seen in Silicon Valley. And then 3 months later going, okay,
Sorry.
this is not what I was expecting, but we'll work on it. And it turns out, like a lot of things, there's lots of jobs out there. Not in hospitality, not in travel, not in transportation or those kinds of industries. But I have students who just got jobs at Google and Apple and Snapchat. But so it is lumpy. It's going to be lumpy when we get to the other shore. Who's going to get there first? Who's going to get there last? And so this is really a time to practice. We're not the mindfulness guys, but to practice a mindset that is, starts with curiosity, leans on radical collaboration, because the answer is going to be in the world with other people. Mm-hmm. And so I think those, like as Dave said, it's still, get curious, talk to people, try stuff, tell your story. And telling your story is actually, even more important nowadays, because you're on Zoom with all these other people, and you just mentioned, hey, I see a bunch of, folks from my class in the chat. We've got to keep telling our stories, and we got to tell each other about our experiences. One, that decreases loneliness, but two, it gives you an opportunity to find that thing you didn't know you were looking for. That opportunity you didn't know you were looking for.
I think it's really interesting how the inclusivity of empathetic listening and radical collaboration that is really fundamental in design thinking is also really important now as we're thinking about how to build a more equitable society. I know you guys have been talking about that, and I'd love to have you share a little bit about that before we open it up to questions.
Okay.
Well, when I talk about radical collaboration, and we talk about this 6 key mindsets that go into design, or what we describe in the introduction of the new book, and 5, and we added 1 of storytelling. But radical collaboration, and when I mentioned that, it's not that you collaborate with radicals, or when you get together, you all have a radical idea. Those things may happen, but it's really radically inclusive. And again, design has always been inclusive, or trying to be anyway, by necessity, because it has this hopeful, actually, belief that the answer is out there. I mean, we're going to go out and try stuff and ideate and then run some prototypes and iterate those. And we really don't think that iteration will spin its wheels. We think, well done, that iteration will progress to a place that really deserves to have something that's solution worthy, or at least, implementation worthy. Now, in order for that to work for the humans who will use it and the humans who are designing it, because the human part of human-centered design is both the human designer, what are processes that work for humans, and human products and services that work for human users. So if you're doing that human thing, you have to hear the whole story, or you're going to miss something. Now, that doesn't mean it hasn't inadvertently leaned into the assets that are provided by systemic racism built into a lot of the infrastructural systems that design finds itself in. I mean, when we did it in the early days at Apple, we were part of an economic system that still had all those attributes to it. So that's not intrinsically corrective. But designers do have a jump on, I should be listening to everybody. That's a should we do believe in, and I kind of think I know how to do it. Bill, Bill's been leading the charge on, we're right, we've been teaching Designing Your Life. I mean, gosh, you just finished what, the 29th or 31st rendering this spring?
Yeah, I think it was 31st.
I think it's 31st.
And right at week 8 of the quarter was the George Floyd murder.
George Floyd murder. And so, and this summer and fall, we're overhauling the whole thing.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about that briefly?
Okay.
I'll be the first to admit that the big flaw in both books and in a lot of the rhetoric we use is designing your life. Well, that's nice, but it's not about your life. It's about designing lives for, that are sustainable, that are inclusive for everyone. It's designing our lives together. We actually had proposed a book called Designing Your Life Together, thinking more about, families and couples and people that are in systems together. But even more importantly now, I mean, particularly because, I teach at a university that is, full of privilege. It's just no way. I mean, we're starting on third base and we're running home and calling it a home run. It's just ridiculous. And we don't have adequate representation at our university of students of color, or Black students and others. And so, so we're leaving out a really big part of this conversation is how does everyone design a life that's, well lived and joyful? How does everyone thrive and change and find happiness at work? Not just, folks from the university that I teach at, a similar group at Yale, but the good, and we've been thinking about this problem for a while. The good news is there's, Dr. Heather Butler down at Cal State University in Dominguez Hills, which is down in Compton, California, has been working really hard on her version of Designing Your Life. She's come to our studio, she's trained, she's one of our super mentors, in fact, in the academic community. And she's a psychology professor, and most of her students are first generation kids at college, and 70–80% of Cal State Dominguez Hills is underrepresented minorities. And she's showing in her research an even more powerful impact on students who have, come from no privilege, have no, essentially, they think they have no networks. They have none of the things that students coming from a more privileged background would have. And yet, she's getting higher increases in scale on Martin Seligman's PERMA scale. It's a scale of thriving and happiness. Better results on hope, on theory of change, on how this impacts career readiness. And so I think we have to be, we're doing a redesign of the curriculum to include an examination of white privilege, and to make sure that the curriculum we're teaching is accessible and feels accessible to every student on our campus, and to students anywhere in any campus. And I think it's really critical, particularly now. I told this story to my students. I was 11 years old. I was at a Cub Scout meeting on a Thursday night. I grew up in Burlington, Massachusetts. At my Cub Scout meeting, come out of the meeting, my dad's waiting in the parking lot in the car. He's clearly upset. I said, "What's the matter, Dad?" He said, "They just shot Martin Luther King." This was April 4th, 1967. And I said, "Who was he?" Or 68. I said, "Who was he?" And he told me about who Martin Luther King. I was 11. I was kind of clueless. And that was the first time I had any awareness that there was a race problem in America. And that was a long time ago. And we're still, if you look at King's speech at Stanford in 67, he was invited to Stanford to do a talk. He talks about, riots are the language of the unheard. And that, the winters of, we're going to have summers of violence if we continue to have winters of not listening and not connecting. So it's critical in life design to think not just of yourself, but of yourself, your community, and for other communities that are not being represented. So we're working really hard to try to figure out how to do that well. And we'll prototype, we'll do exactly, we always use our design method to design new things. So we'll prototype some new classes in the fall. We'll reach out to the Black Student Union, the students of color on campus. Stanford does have, 15, 17% first-gen students. It's not completely underrepresented. And there's a lot of wisdom in those groups of kids. And we really want to make sure that when they come to our class, they feel like they are being heard and included.
Jennifer, let me give you an example. Now, by the way, Bill and I don't spend most of our time trying to orchestrate people who are doing macro social and civic change management. There are people who do that. One of our colleagues, Bandy Banerjee, specializes in big change. We're a little more micro guys, but one thing I've noticed, and this may be relative to the people listening and they're thinking about what kind of change can I make? Both in the pandemic moment and the shift in the industry I'm in, or in this civic moment, in a whole variety, whether it's income injustice in the economy, whether it's racism. Look, if you're participating in a system, particularly of any kind, institutional or process-wise, that you would like to be a change agent of, one of your forms of impact, we talk about impact a lot as part of the life design, is to be a change agent. Almost all significant change involves at least two things. An idea whose time has come, and a reframe that can catch people's attention. We've been talking about design thinking, for the better part of going on 40 minutes now. Well, you could argue one of David Kelly, the founder of IDEO's most significant contributions to the design field is renaming the darn thing. human-centered design was what we talked for 40 years, 45 years, and then we shifted this, and we still use that term internally, to design thinking. David just renamed it. He says, I think people need, it's not, oh, I'm not creative, I can't draw, so I can't be a designer. Okay, you're stuck on that misperception. We're gonna, it's just a way of thinking. Oh, I could probably learn that. You know, and boom, the stuff starts breaking open. I think in this present moment, I can remember years ago, a young man who got himself out of the gangland in inner city at the age of 16, young black man, came to Stanford, became an entrepreneur. Somebody hooked him up with me as a mentor. And he decided one of his life's missions about 12 years ago, 10 years ago, was to convince me that I was a racist, which took a long time because I'm a very nice white guy, you know, and like an awful lot of people who are unconsciously white fragile, you know, I'm very defensive about, I've never done a nasty thing. And he finally got me to understand the distinction between bigotry and prejudice. So he reframed the question of, no, I know you're not a bigot, Dave, but you are prejudiced. You do prejudge. Your brain can't not see color. You do see color. You know, but that reframe of language, bigotry versus prejudice, opened the door. And right now the language is not just, are you a racist, but how have you become a proactive anti-racist? So there's a new term on the horizon called anti-racism. You know, hot selling book, just a little ahead of one of ours, is how to be an anti-racist. That is fun in a time whose moment has come. That language, that reframe, is an incredibly powerful agent of potential change. Doesn't make change, but without it, the change doesn't get started. So one tip, if you want to do organizational change, is look around you about what deserves to change, which is a much longer list than what will. And where does there seem to be something whose time is coming? And can you find a reframe, a generative reframe that could start catalyzing it? And you can start prototyping, just testing out that language or that conversation, and very quickly find out whether or not you could actually start to make a difference.
Thank you.
There's a bazillion questions in the questions.
Yeah, so it's time to talk to the people.
I wanted to shout out because there's someone said, hi, I'm a high school teacher. Can you suggest some design thinking exercises? And yes, I just put it in the chat, 2 things. If you haven't run the Marshmallow Challenge, run the Marshmallow Challenge. It's an awesome thing. Look it up on the internet. Tom Mujak, who's a thought leader at Autodesk, has made it a TED Talk and other things. But the Marshmallow Challenge works every time we do it in class. We still do it, and it's amazing. And then I've also put the D-Schools K through 12 site up on the chat, because it's got a lot of resources for K through 12. Ever since the D-School started, they've run a lab for K through 12. And I think they've, you know, they run trainings for teachers, they run trainings for administrators, and they give away lots and lots and lots of really cool design thinking exercises, which will help your students think out of the box. So that was an easy one. I just wanted to answer that because I love high school teachers.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a really cool, in that labs group, there's a really cool thing with a group that you did that studied with you on doing, what are they called? The rooms for assessment.
Escape rooms.
Yeah, escape rooms for assessments for kids. And it's really fun. There's a lot of great resources there. For experienced professionals who would like to redesign their career and life, where would you recommend us start? Say, how can we go through the class you taught by ourselves?
Oh. Well, you know, one of the ways people are doing it, and I think it's really fun, and we encourage it because designers always work in teams, is form a little design team. Go get 3 people and start a book club, essentially. Go to the Designing Your Life, the book Facebook page, Designing Your Life, the book. And I think there's a couple of hundred active book clubs at any one time, posting, you know, their Odyssey plans and posting their good time journals. It's so much easier to do it with someone than by yourself. But you can also, the book is pretty much self-teaching, so you could just take the book and go. And remember, you know, set the bar low, start with really simple things. And in terms of redesigning a job, there's 4 ideas for how you can redesign your job that you don't even need to ask your boss for, mostly, in most cases. And you don't need to change, you don't have to quit. You can actually redesign in place. So take a look in the new book. There's 4 methods for that. You want to say more on that, Dave?
Well, just on the training thing, not selling anything, but, you know, we got asked that question. So, hey, can I take the class? Can I take the class? We're going, oh, great, thanks. No. We got tired of no. So there now is an online, if you like video like this, come on down, creativelive.com. So Creative Live's a big online training company. We worked with them. So creativelive.com. has the Designing Your Life course with Bill and Dave. And it's literally, 22 modules that are taken from our 9-hour, one-day super intensive, how to do a whole semester course in a day workshop for grown-ups. And so which is normally $200 or $300 and is currently on sale this summer for $29. So deal. Anyway, so if you like the training class, try that. But in terms of, the whole redesign thing, and we're talking about 4 strategies. The first is re-enlist and re-engage, which is literally just tell yourself another story. And then the second one is remodel, which is, you have to tear the walls down. You can just move the furniture around, change the flowers a little bit with a surprising change. And particularly there, what you can do is a little more of what you really like and there isn't enough of it in your job description, or a little less of what you don't like. Most people don't mind getting more value add for the same money, employer-wise. And so there are lots of ways you can make surprisingly small changes with surprisingly large impacts. I'll just stop there because we have lots more questions.
Okay. So another question is, Bill, I really resonated with your comment on empathizing with those in strife under oppression around the planet. People in places like Hong Kong, Yemen, Palestine, the Philippines, and the likes are at this moment, wanting to solve all of their issues or be a part of that solution is something I struggle with. What is the best way to contribute or attempt to while not pouring my energy into their circumstances? So like,
yeah, I think this is, there's a balance in this, and there's the notion of sort of, skillful means, like what can I do that would be helpful? Fretting about the world isn't helpful. Sending $5 to every charity in the world probably isn't putting enough energy behind any one thing. I'm particularly wrapped up in the issues in Hong Kong right now because I have many friends there. I used to have an office there when I was running my consulting company. I had an office in Hong Kong. And watching a brilliant city that was a beacon of, of truth and freedom, if you will say that, and the rule of law just being destroyed is astonishing to me. So one, do what you can do person to person, support your friends if you have friends in these situations. And then 2, this isn't necessarily a design problem. This is like, okay, where can I have impact? What am I good at? What do I know how to do? And maybe what I know how to do is write a check and support a charity that needs it. There's plenty of places to research who's doing effective work through NGOs, nonprofits, and other things, and who's making the most use of their money. I think that this is also a managing your mindset sort of thing. We see a lot of people right now, and it's just hard right now because you might be very isolated. You might be socially isolated, socially distanced. The news feed is a constant string of it's getting worse, we thought it was going to get better, it's getting worse on the COVID side. And then you have the crisis in the South China Sea, you have the crisis in the Middle East, which seems never ending, you have the crisis in Hong Kong, on and on and on. I think you got to manage the thing that you care about, pay attention to the thing that you care about. It's a gravity problem to solve world peace, but you could pick one part of it and decide that, I'm going to spend some time and some energy on that. And if I do so, what are my means? What am I skilled at? And what could I apply that would be useful? I think that's, and set the bar low and see if you can walk away feeling like, well, I didn't fix the whole thing, but I helped that one little thing. Maybe my $100, put some food on a table in a refugee camp.
This is where this iteration thing really matters, in terms of personal practices. And Bill came up with some time ago, a morning mantra that leverages 2 of our ideas. I won't go through the backdrop on them, and he would say while he's shaving, each day, I live in the best of all possible worlds, which is just an ontological claim of a positive mindset, because the worst is also true. But I live in the best of all possible worlds, and everything I do today, I choose to do. Practicing Dan Gilbert's, choosing your choice to get the most out of it. And that was transformatively positive, and it didn't work during the pandemic. So we got together and we noticed that we were both going through this. So we rewrote it and said, the world is going through a pandemic crisis, and I'm going through lots of transition in the neutral zone. But the choices I make today are good enough for now, and I'm coming back tomorrow. So that's a reframe. And so if you're trying to listen to the whole world, you can let the empathy for the entire world inform your compassion, and then direct it to what you can do, and live within the limitation of you're good enough for now. And by the way, even whatever you decide is enoughness for now, try that for, a couple of weeks or for a month. And then you stop and you ask the question, is it really good enough for now? Do I feel like that's adequate? And I can adjust, and I can try to go bigger, or I'm spreading myself too thin. No one knows how to get this right. You can even iterate your pandemic self.
I think one of the things that why people should read your books that points to this is the idea of the North Star. If you know the things that have value to you, you know that you can put your energy in them and they fulfill you.
Right. And one of the things the pandemic has revealed that has been around forever is that people don't have equal means or equal access to healthcare, equal access to education, equal access to anything in this country. It's pretty divided up by economics, and the economics follows privilege. So wherever you are, there's a homeless person in your neighborhood that has been further displaced by the pandemic, or there's an old person's home, some place that needs a volunteer to drop off stuff. My wife now on the weekends, she's volunteered with the food bank here, the Marin Food Bank. It's right around the corner from our house, their big warehouse. And they were doing 4,000 meals a day, and now they're doing 22,000 meals a day. And so you pull up in your car, you've got an app. They tell you, here's the 25 bags of food you're going to deliver. They put them in your trunk. You don't touch them. They don't touch you. You go to the first one in your app. You drop a bag on the porch of somebody who needs some food. There's so many ways now we could be involved in creating more community and creating more aliveness in our communities, and particularly reaching out to people who really are suffering in much more difficult. I mean, yeah, I'm bored. And I don't have anything, and I can't go hang out with my friends, but that's really different than I'm starving and living on the street. In San Francisco, it's a huge homeless problem, and so there's you don't need to go to Yemen or Hong Kong or Palestine. I'm sure in your own town, there's people you could actually see the impact of your work and start with something small. It's scary. It's actually pretty. I really, when my wife told me she was going to do this, my first reaction was, "Oh, is this safe? Is this okay for you to be driving around dropping bags of groceries places?" And I realized that was a reaction, that was coming from the fear of people that aren't like me. So
let me shift our gears a little bit, if I may, and leverage on that idea, but in a broader way. That's back to sort of career SOM stuff. So one of the questions I'm seeing here is, hey, I love the Good Time Journal, but I learned a lot about the environments and actions that make me happy, but I'm stuck on the prototyping phase. Any advice on how to get over my fears and jump in? So for those who don't know, the Good Time Journal is an exercise in the book that talks about, look, if you're not even sure where the heck to start, just watch yourself. Don't change what you're doing. Watch yourself daily. Where are you highly engaged? Where are you unengaged? Each day you rank and take notes on where was I engaged? When did I enter into flow, the optimal state of psychological involvement? And start learning what's working, what's not working for me. And then, so that sounds like this writer says that was really interesting. Now what do I do with that? I can do that pretty safely. I'm just taking notes. Nobody's looking. So how do I turn that? You've curated your curiosity with that. You've animated some things, and some questions are going to arise out of that. Like, gee, how can I do more of? I love the times when I'm coaching one-on-one with my team members. That's not really part of my job description, but I love that. Or I notice, boy, I have all this quant stuff in my background, and I hate the Excel stuff. Like, that's so weird to me. I wonder why I don't like something I'm so good at. So some question will arise that could invite you to be the beginning of a prototype, because design prototypes ask interesting questions. They don't prove you're right. Like, I've got this thing all ready to go, I just want to test it. That's not a design prototype. A design prototype is because, how does this work? I wonder what this might look like. So Bill, the skill of setting the bar low so you can clear it and coming up with what that low bar is, that's a crucial part of actually doing life design. How do you go from good time journaling to actually coming up with a prototype idea?
I think that, one, pick something that's actually doable in the next few days. the easiest one, particularly now during COVID, is you probably get anybody to do a Zoom call with you, right? And the way you set this up is you say, hey, I've gotten really curious about this alumni management stuff and how alumni groups and these affinity groups stay together and connected. And Jennifer seems to know a lot about that. I looked her up on LinkedIn. I looked her up on the Yale site. I wonder if she'd have a 30-minute Zoom coffee chat with me. And I'm not asking for anything other than Jennifer's story. I want to know, why do you do this kind of stuff? How did you get into it? What are the sort of psychic benefits? What do you get out of it? I'm going to come with my curiosity. I'm going to be preloaded with a bunch of really good questions that are going to, hopefully probe some deeply into the conversation. And in doing so, I'm going to learn. We're looking for what we call her story and then narrative resonance. Whatever she said, when she says something and something inside me starts ringing, going, ooh, that sounds like I would really like that. I'm actually doing time travel, right? I'm traveling into the world where I might be like Jennifer in 5 years. She's already there, so she can tell me what it feels like to live in that world. And that's going to give me a ton of information, and that's a prototype. And that might lead to another, and the power question is, gee, that was so interesting. Is there anybody else you think I should talk to? And then Jennifer's going to give me a couple more names, and it's just going to keep going. And in a post-COVID world, it would actually be, hey, could I volunteer, to spend some time working on something that you're doing? Or could I noticed you have a blog. It must be hard to keep a blog busy all the time. Can I guest blog for you 1 or 2 times a week? And all of these little interactions, these little radical collaborations in the world, in the real world, hopefully not just on screens, give me insight into what actually makes me energized, makes me more curious, provides me with more questions. You're on the right track when you just start thinking of dozens of prototypes you want to try. And when you have too many prototypes, you're in great shape. But it really just starts with the curiosity and a conversation with somebody. And I have really, really introverted students sometimes. Students that, come from whatever, the sciences or engineering, and typically is, the stereotype is kind of true. They're often quite introverted and a little bit nerdy. And they're like, I can't talk to anybody. That's too hard. And I go, well, then you're going to do it because it's an assignment and you're going to do it. So let's start with somebody who's safe. And the two kinds of safe people are friends of a friend, my dad's old freshman roommate, who's now a big lawyer in New York, and I wanted to learn about law school. Or they come with a warm introduction. I say, tell me who you want to talk to. I'm going to write an email saying, hi, Bill Burnett, professor designing your life. John would love to talk with you about your groundbreaking nematode research. Would you mind giving John 30 minutes of your time? And then all John has to do is follow up and saying, yeah, I really, really want it. So start with a friend or start with a warm intro, and you can do it. And by the way, even the introverted students will come back sometimes and go, hey, this is kind of cool.
They talk to me.
People actually talk to me.
Yeah.
And I am curious about what they're doing. And I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking for anything other than a conversation with a smart human being. And the conversations about something we have in common. Jennifer, I looked you up on LinkedIn. I think you're amazing. I'll bet you think you're pretty amazing. So we have something in common. Can you tell me how amazing you are? Works every time. Well, a little less goofy, but it works every time.
Yeah.
Jennifer, we probably got time for like 1 or 2, maybe 2 more questions. Why don't you carefully select the exact right questions of the too many we have?
Okay, well, I have some preloaded questions, and
Okay.
one of them is, I think a lot of them seem to be similar, so I feel okay sharing this one. Where is it here? Bill, you have talked about, I have heard you talk about how researchers in the past have found evidence that the process of design thinking leads to increased positive effect. And that positive effect leads to more likely positive outcomes. And it would be really nice in this time when people are looking for something to be optimistic about to know why design thinking is good for them.
Well, I think, whatever you pay attention to, that's your reality. So if you're paying attention to your curiosity, you're paying attention to empathy. If you're paying attention to this idea of, creative generation. Like it's, the design thinking model is start with empathy, then redefine the problem, then have lots of ideas, then prototype and test. One of the pieces of research on our class was they looked at students, before and after the class, and they compared them to a control group. Students who actually took the class had twice the ability to what they call novel ideation. They can have twice as many ideas on any subject. Give them a question, they brainstorm twice as many ideas as they did before. And that builds what David Kelly called creative confidence in his book. And so it's a bunch of small steps of learning to be more creative, generating more ideas through curiosity. And all of that is kind of, on the like positive serotonin, positive dopamine, like having ideas, brainstorming, getting, loosening up the sense of, it's a box and I can't get out of it, but having more ideas and more ways of generating possible alternatives for the future does tend to create a more positive mindset, because you're spending a lot of time doing something really fun, which is natural to human beings. You're being curious and you're being inventive.
Going back to the first thing Bill was talking about ways of thinking, engineering thinking, business thinking, analytic research thinking, those and design really is different. It's bottom up. There's a fundamental orientation, and we say we don't shit on you, but the truth is, I will argue that design has a whole bunch of embedded points of view and belief systems that are intrinsically positive. In engineering, there's a right answer, and in business, we can win. And in research, was it published? So there are these transactional win-lose things and so your brain is constantly looking for what's right and what's wrong, and where's the problem, and that critical, almost skeptical thinking. There's a lot of positive feedback for that out in the competitive world. And in design, we kind of go, gee, I don't know, let's go give it a try. And I believe that the answer is to be found out there. I believe that, these other people I'm going to collaborate with want to work with me, and together we can come up with something I couldn't possibly do alone. It's fundamentally communitarian in mindset. I believe that these little steps, and I'm going to forestall, but wait a minute, where's the solution? We don't know yet. Keep going, keep going. There's a faithfulness that this iterative thing will get somewhere. All those things are positive, and they all don't believe there's only one right answer, and am I there yet, yes or no? So we get out of this binary dualistic right-wrongness, which is very compressive. So it's a generative it's a greenfield space. And that literally we light up a different part of your brain than the neocortex that, cognitive analytic thinking mostly. I think people just like being in the other part of their brain.
Thank you. It is 1 o'clock, and I cannot tell you how much I am grateful that you did this, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope everyone else did, and I hope everyone goes off and designs something fabulous for their 2020.
And somebody asked, hey, what was that site where the online class is? It's called Creative Live. I put that in the chat, and somebody also wanted another link to the D School's K through 12 program, so I just put that in the chat as well if you saw it. Sometimes if you join in alternate times, you don't get the whole chat, but it's back in there. And if you need any other help, just call Jennifer.
Well, Bill, put in the book. The book website is just the title with a dot, Designing Your Life. And there's a whole bunch of free stuff there.
Yeah. And thank you.
Thank you.